What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch Fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we are hopping into a 12-team full PPR mock draft for the 2023 fantasy football season. Let's go ahead and take a look at the roster settings here. We've got one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a tight end, two flex spots tonight. We're rolling with no kicker or defense and 5 bench spots. Guys, it is mock draft season. If you have any mock draft requests, as long as you guys are subscribed to the channel, drop them in the comments down below and I will get your mock draft put on the schedule. 8 teams, 14 teams, half PPR, full PPR, super flex, 3 wide receivers, whatever it is, let me know. I will get it put on the schedule. This is what I do every month of August. It is my favorite time of year. I'm so excited for the coming fantasy football season. If you guys have any other comments, questions, or concerns pertaining to the 2023 fantasy football season, drop them down below as well. I'll get back to you as I can. Whether you guys are new or not, hit that like button on the way in. If you guys are new to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you guys consider subscribing. But without further ado, let's not waste any time. Let's hop into another 2023 fantasy football mock draft. All right, so for the purpose of today's video, we are drafting from the 1.12, which quite frankly is one of my favorite spots to draft from. I like the end of the first round. And at the end of the day, when you're sitting there looking at the 2.1, even if you're at the 1.11, you get the 2.2. And for the most part, if you're at the 1.10, you get the 2.3. In my opinion, you are getting a first round value player at the beginning of the second round. So that is just such a huge advantage to start your draft. And we're looking at specific strategies from the 1.12. I like to either go hero running back or just straight up go very aggressive at wide receiver. And quite frankly, hero running back, not always my favorite from this position, but you can definitely consider taking Saquon Barkley, then taking a stud wide receiver like Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe A.J. Brown or CeeDee Lamb if they fall to you. But I also just like starting my draft with, 2 of those wide receivers who we just mentioned. It all depends on who goes in the first round and when and where they go, who falls to you, who doesn't fall to you. But like I said, Saquon Barkley is probably the only running back you can really consider. If you're a little bit lower back in the first round, like the 1.10, maybe Austin Eckler is there. Ultimately, I think the best route is just grabbing 2 stud wide receivers. Get the best available running back at the 3.12 and then fill in your first flex spot with a wide receiver, being that this is a full PPR format at the 4.1. At the 5.12, we're going to target the best value quarterback. And at the 6.1, we probably need to take that second running back. After that, we're going to see if a good value tight end falls to us at the 7.12 or 8.1. And then after that, we're just knocking out running backs and wide receivers for the rest of the draft. But it all depends on who falls to us during each round, but that is our game plan for today's video. So CeeDee Lamb is here, which is absolutely ridiculous in my mind, a heavy running back draft to start things off. I love A.J. Brown here. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown here. You really can't go wrong with either player, but let's just take A.J. Brown off of the board. I did not think both CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown would fall to us there. Can't go wrong with Amon-Ra St. Brown as your wide receiver 2 there. Devontae Adams is fine. I really like Garrett Wilson, but I probably like the rest of those wide receivers over him. If you go Wilson over Adams, I'm okay with it just because of the quarterback play that we're expecting in Vegas. Nonetheless, a great start to this draft. Nick Chubb creeping up into the first round, not the craziest thing. He is really popular in a lot of fantasy communities right now. A lot of fantasy managers have a lot of stock in Nick Chubb because they believe that Browns offense is going to take a big step forward in Deshaun Watson's second year as a Cleveland Brown. So not the craziest thing I've seen, and we've definitely seen Nick Chubb go at the 1.11 and the 1.12. I mean, we run so many mock drafts, and I really think that is one of the best things you can do in the month of August, because when it comes to your home league, at the end of the day, once it's draft day, you have no idea what's going to happen. Crazy things happen all the time, and just mock drafting consistently will definitely prepare you for that. That is why we run mock drafts on our live streams. That is why we run them in these pre-recorded videos as a community, and overall it just keeps you on your toes 24/7 and as prepared as possible. All right, so Plenty more wide receivers gone here in the second round in interesting order. It's definitely nothing crazy to see Devonta Smith go with a 2.7. I love Jalen Waddle with a 2.6, and Olave is a great pick at the 2.9 as well. I love all those wide receivers. Nonetheless, Derrick Henry, Ramondre Stevenson gone. We're just going to kind of sit back and see what happens here when we're looking forward to the 3.11. The running back that I like the best in that range is Kenneth Walker if he falls to us. And there are enough fantasy managers who are afraid of Kenneth Walker's situation, who think he's going to take a big enough hit in volume with Zach Charbonnet there, whatever it may be. He's got the groin injury popping up. I still love Kenneth Walker in that range. I've been talking about this for feels like weeks now, but nonetheless, I just think he's a great value towards the 3.12. I also really like Travis Etienne in that range as well. In some drafts, you'll see Josh Jacobs fall out that far, but I'm not really a fan of mock drafting Josh Jacobs right now because, by the time we're drafting for our real leagues, you just don't know what's going to be going on with Josh Jacobs. And, it just could be really unrealistic to have him as part of a mock draft, a mock draft roster in the third round. And there he goes at the 3.1. So out of the question anyways. So Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker are top targets at the 312. Then looking forward to that flex option, first flex option at the wide receiver position at the 4.1. Calvin Ridley is not going to fall, but that would be fantastic. Amari Cooper might fall, but I highly doubt it. And there goes Calvin Ridley. I mean, Ridley is just a player. Like, if you want Ridley on your fantasy rosters right now, guys, you're going to have to go out and make an executive decision to draft him early, maybe earlier than you're comfortable with. I've seen Ridley in mock drafts go as early as a 2.10, so just be prepared for it. The hype is real with Calvin Ridley. Amari Cooper, a very popular name in the early third round as well. So both of those guys are off of the board. T. Higgins is still available. I expect him to go in, the next couple of picks. DK Metcalf still available, but looking forward to the 4.2. Realistically, the player that I am drafting left and right all over the place is DJ Moore in that range. He is one of my favorite flex options going into the year. Hands down. I think the Bears as a passing unit are going to take a big step forward now that DJ Moore is there. I believe in Justin Fields. I believe in him progressing overall. I'm not worried about him as a passer. I think you have to kind of follow the trend over the past couple years. You look at last year with the Eagles getting A.J. Brown, the step that they took forward. You look at the year before with Matthew Stafford going to the Rams, Cooper Kupp getting Matthew Stafford, the step they took forward. The year before, Tom Brady going to the Bucks, Chris Godwin and Evans balling out for 2 years. So do I think that the Bears and, Justin Fields are necessarily at any of those players' level? Maybe not. But I think they are definitely close enough. And, the other team kind of unit that I would put in that same breath of air is the unit we just talked about, the Jacksonville Jaguars, them acquiring Calvin Ridley for the year and Trevor Lawrence looking to take a step forward. Those are the two offenses that I just really am big fans of overall. So Kenneth Walker does fall to us, but so does Najee Harris. So I'm going to switch it up tonight. I'm going to take Najee Harris here. I don't mind Kenneth Walker whatsoever. And I still want to go wide receiver here. And I do really like DJ Moore, but DK Metcalf is also available. So this is kind of a tough pick. And, we could go back-to-back running backs here and get Kenneth Walker. We could go Metcalf. We could go DJ Moore. All of these decisions are perfectly fine. But let's go ahead and add DK Metcalf. We're rolling with the veteran crew tonight. CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, and Metcalf. I mean, I guess DJ Moore still would have been a veteran. Najee Harris, I am fine with as a RB1. I did not expect him to be there. I still really like Kenneth Walker. You can't really go wrong with any of those choices. We had a lot of good value just fall to us. But let's go ahead and break down Najee Harris and DK Metcalf because we were talking about two completely different players leading up to those two picks. Najee Harris, people act like Najee Harris is the worst running back in the entire National Football League after his year last year. Did he completely regress from year 1 to year 2? Sure. Went from RB3 to RB14. But when you break down his numbers, comparing the 2 years, they're not that bad. They're not that big of a difference. He just took a massive hit in the passing game with Ben Roethlisberger retiring and Kenny Pickett being in his rookie year. So if you have any faith whatsoever in Kenny Pickett and the Steelers offense taking any type of step forward next year, if you like Deontay Johnson as a late round pick, if you like Pat Fryermuth a lot, I think both those guys are good values. If you believe in George Pickens as an upside selection, then why wouldn't you believe in Najee Harris as well? I mean, literally, his rookie season, 1,200 rushing yards, just over 1,000 last year. So a little bit of a hit, but nothing crazy. Same amount of rushing touchdowns last year as he had in his rookie season at 7. Same amount of receiving touchdowns in his rookie year as he had last year, 3 receiving touchdowns the last 2 years. The big hit, though, 74 receptions his rookie season, 41 last year. So we're just hoping that he can get back to that receiving game involvement. But nonetheless, when you look at Najee Harris' stat lines last year, double digits every game except for 3, and he barely missed the double digit mark in week 10 at 9.9. So was his ceiling incredibly high? No. Most of those weeks he was getting you 10 to 12 points, but he went on kind of a tear at the end of the year through the fantasy playoffs at the most convenient time possible. 14.6, 15.5, 20.3, and if you did play through week 18 last year, 14.4. So I still like Najee Harris because he, in my eyes, is kind of a model of consistency. I like Kenneth Walker right there. A little bit more risk with the injuries lingering, maybe more, potential players like Zach Charbonnet in that offense taking away potential touches, but Najee Harris, I just think, is a good, consistent pick right there. So we talked a lot about DJ Moore, who fell back all the way to the 4.11. Plenty other wide receivers off the board before he was selected, but DK Metcalf did fall to us, and at the end of the day, Metcalf, once again, just a model of consistency. His ceiling is a little bit lower overall, and it does feel like he has regressed since his rookie season, but you know what you're going to get out of DK Metcalf. And in full PPR formats, you can never go wrong with that style player in your flex spot. So I'll take Metcalf there all day long. I think he's a great pick. And when you break down his season last year, very consistent overall, double digits in every game except for 6 games. So there were some disappointing weeks, don't get me wrong, and we want to see more red zone opportunities, more red zone touchdowns at the end of the day out of Metcalf than what he had last year with a career low of 6. But I'm of the belief with JSN being added to this offense, you could think of things like that is less targets for DK Metcalf, but to me, I think it's just going to help open things up because JSN is going to be a great receiving option. Tyler Lockett's going to take the top off of defenses, and ultimately defenses are going to have to account for both Tyler Lockett and JSN on top of DK Metcalf, and that is a very challenging task to say the least. So I think Metcalf is going to have some weeks where he really shines this week, and once again, I just love him as a flex option right there. So here we are back at the 5.12. Like I said earlier in the video, we're going to take the best available quarterback here. Then we're going to get our RB2. Lots of good quarterbacks sitting right here. Burrow, Jackson, Fields, T-Law, any of those guys could go at the 5.11. They don't. Tyler Lockett's off the board. You can't go wrong with any of these picks. Joe Burrow has the calf strain. He's being a little bit faded overall in mock drafts right now. I'm going to take upside here as much as I actually do like Lamar Jackson right here under a Todd Monken-led offense. He's going to be slinging it. Nothing wrong with Jackson there. Truthfully, really nothing wrong with Burrow, but there is a chance he misses 2 to 3 weeks to start the year. But give me Fields. We just talked a lot about him. Give me the upside. Give me what I think is the most potential rushing upside because I think Lamar Jackson is going to go back to Lamar Action Jackson under Todd Monken and potentially not run the ball as much after getting that massive contract. And then as my RB2, I'm going to take a player that a lot of people hate. I'm going to take DeAndre Swift because what does Swift bring to the upside on a consistent basis? He brings a massive amount of upside. And when we look at Swift now with the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think Swift could have gone, could have been traded to a better team than the Eagles. We know at the end of the day, this Nick Sirianni offense is going to run the football a ton. On top of that, when we look at this Eagles backfield, Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad Penny, Boston Scott, DeAndre Swift is going to be utilized to the best of his abilities. He doesn't have to be a 3-down back. There isn't all that pressure on him. He doesn't have to gain the trust of the coaching staff or whatever the problem was with the Lions. The injuries aren't going to be as big of a concern because they're going to be able to rotate other running backs if necessary. But they're going to be able to line up DeAndre Swift, utilize him, utilize that, potential home run hitter, type of player that he is whenever they want. They're going to be able to utilize him in the passing game. He's going to catch a lot of balls this year. Swift just brings a ton of upside. He's in one of the best offenses in the league. I love him as an RB2, especially behind a player like Najee Harris, who maybe doesn't have the highest ceiling, but brings a lot of consistency. So, and the other thing here is when you look at this Eagles offense, like Jalen Hurts is a dual threat quarterback. That helps the efficiency of running backs extensively. On top of that, opposing defenses have to account for A.J. Brown. They have to account for CeeDee Lamb. They have to account for Dallas Goedert on top of Jalen Hurts, who we just mentioned as a dual threat quarterback as well. So Swift is going to have plenty of moments throughout the season where he shines. Don't let the prior history of injuries, the prior history of whatever happened in Detroit, because we know how talented DeAndre Swift is. It just didn't mesh right with the Detroit Lions. And now he is going to have an opportunity to absolutely ball out with one of the best offenses, maybe the best offense in the entire league in 2023. So I'm not afraid to draft him at the 6.1 whatsoever. Moving along here, 6th round is wrapping up. Some notable players. I love Rachaad White in this range. Rachaad White, in terms of full PPR formats, is set to have a massive year. 50 receptions in his rookie season, only dropped 3 passes. And if Baker Mayfield wins the starting quarterback battle, which don't get me wrong, Kyle Trask could. We've heard a lot of different reports coming out of training camp, but Baker Mayfield as a starter last season checked the football down more than any other quarterback in the NFL. And I just think that White is going to get a ton of targets. He has the potential to catch like 70 passes this year. And in full PPR, that is massive because those 50 receptions we talked about from last year, all of those happened with Leonard Fournette still being the primary back for a majority of the season. And don't get me wrong, Tom Brady, historically does like to check the football down. But, if Baker's a guy, we just talked about what Baker did last year, Baker can absolutely utilize Rachaad White to the best of his abilities. And, Cam Akers also goes in the same round at the 6.11. Look at what Cam Akers did with Baker Mayfield as a starter last year. Was he necessarily, crazy in the passing game? No, but he was very efficient. And for whatever reason, Baker Mayfield's bad quarterback play tends to bring out the best in running backs, it feels like. So I've talked a lot about DeAndre Swift since he went to the Philadelphia Eagles, and I absolutely love him in that range. Nonetheless, let's take a look at what we want to do at the 7.12 and the 8.1. For me, we've got to take another running back here, and we need to fill in that next flex spot as well. So I absolutely think we need to take the best available wide receiver. I like Zay Flowers in this range. He's long gone. Mike Evans is an option. Quentin Johnston is an option. And, quite frankly, believe it or not, if we don't reach for Sky Moore at the 8.1, we're probably not landing Sky Moore. So nonetheless, when we start to take a look here, we absolutely need to go running back. There's no way we can pass, a running back up here. So let's take Javonte Williams, who I'm a little bit hesitant on. But at the end of the day, he's a pretty good value at the 7.12, even coming off of that injury. And then I think we probably need to go best available wide receiver. If we don't, we could take a tight end here, go Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, Evan Ingram, or we could go with Antonio Gibson as our 4th running back. But I think we ultimately draft a wide receiver, and we draft a wide receiver who brings some upside to the table. Let's go Quentin Johnston. You look at the available wide receivers. Mike Evans, who I still think is a good value here. Treylon Burks, Kadarius Toney, Brandon Cooks, Michael Thomas are the top-rated players. But we've got to try and fill in that 4th flex spot. And, on paper, it's technically Javonte Williams, but we want it to be a wide receiver. So what we're going to do here is just try and get the most wide receivers with the most upside to start to wrap up the draft, get one more running back, and get our tight end. So it's kind of tough right there because I do really like Antonio Gibson. I don't think A.J. Dillon's a bad pick, and I don't even think Brian Robinson is a bad pick. But I think we have the potential to land Devontae Shane, Jerick McKinnon, and even guys like Damian Harris with one of our next selections. And I mean, there goes Antonio Gibson. If you want to go Gibson over Javante, I don't have a problem with it. At this range, we're just trying to take the best available running back. Like I said, Javante Williams coming off the, major injury and everything. It does concern me, but at the end of the seventh round, I still feel like he's a pretty good value. And throughout, the offseason, it looks like he is progressing very well. If you believe in this Sean Payton offense, if you believe in the Broncos taking a step forward, whatever it may be, I think you have to consider Javante as a RB3 or RB4. Quentin Johnston, on the other hand, in a beautiful position, a beautiful landing spot with the Chargers. We know that Herbert is going to sling the football around. He was hurt last year. Keenan Allen was hurt. Mike Williams was hurt. These guys are going to be healthy this year, hopefully all year. You got Austin Eckler out of the backfield. Opposing defenses are just going to have a tough time figuring out how they're going to defend Quentin Johnston on top of Keenan Allen, on top of Mike Williams, on top of Eckler. And even you have Gerald Everett at the tight end position, and Josh Palmer is a perfectly fine wide receiver 4. You've got a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. The Chargers are going to be slinging the football a ton this year. I'll take a shot on a rookie wide receiver in Quentin Johnston to start the 8th round all day long. Now, the question is, do we land Sky Moore in the 9th round or not? Probably not. He is a player similar to Zay Flowers right now who is just aggressively rising in ADP. And like I told you guys, if we didn't go Sky Moore at 8.1, we're probably not getting him. There's a small chance, but I also know my community and, the individuals that I draft with, and they are probably not going to allow me to select him with this next coming pick. But nonetheless, like I said, guys, Sky Moore, Zay Flowers, drastically moving up in ADP. If you guys want a piece of them, you have to go out and get them when you feel like you have the opportunity to do so, because they are not being drafted at their current ADP. So if Sky Moore is there, he's absolutely the next player I want, but we do need to start to consider drafting a tight end as well. So Evan Ingram, Pat Fryermuth, and Cole Kmet are my top targets. There is a chance that any of those guys go in the next couple of picks, but we want to go ahead and get, a good value tight end, but still a very reliable kind of stud tight end as well. And if Sky Moore's there, I'll take him. And there he goes at the 9.6. So I actually like Cortland Sutton in this range. And outside of that, I'm probably holding off at wide receiver and looking at who is the best available running back. Jerick McKinnon, Damian Harris are the two names I'm looking at. I don't mind Jamal Williams. Samaje Perrine's fine in this range, but we already have Javante. And so for me, if we don't land one of those two guys, we're probably holding off and taking like 2 dart throws at running back late. Nonetheless, I mean, I think we're sitting pretty okay here. We could also consider fading tight end here and getting just a wide receiver and a running back with these next 2 picks, but it's a very risky game. When we look across the board, there's more than one team without a tight end. I just don't think it's worth it. Plus, there are still fantasy managers, who might draft George Kittle or Darren Waller, who have a history of injuries and want a second tight end, or even a guy like Kyle Pitts, who still want a second tight end. So for me, I think with these next 2 picks, as much as I like Cortland Sutton in this range, which call me crazy, but I just do, double-digit fantasy points every game last year in games where he was healthy, except for 3. And, we just talked about the Broncos potentially taking a step forward as an offense. As much as I like him here, we got to take a running back. Give me Jerick McKinnon. And then we have to take the best available tight end. You can go Evan Ingram here. You can go Pat Fryermuth. You can go Cole Kmet. You can consider Dalton Schultz. But I like all these guys. I'm just going to go Pat Fryermuth. I think he's going to be incredibly consistent. I love Evan Ingram. He's the upside pick there, but ultimately give me Fryermuth and we'll move along, because I think he's just going to bring a ton of consistency to the table all year round. But you can't really go wrong with any of those tight ends. So 3 more selections for the night, and redraft formats, whether it's double flex or single flex, I'm okay with just taking 4 running backs. We have a little bit of uncertainty, even between Swift, who I still really like, we talked a lot about, but still a history of injuries. And then Javante coming out the injury. Then Jerick McKinnon, a good value at the end of the 9th, but ultimately still a veteran running back. And the way the Kansas City Chiefs offenses ran, you just never really know what's going to happen outside of, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey being incredibly consistent. So we could consider one more running back, but I want that wide receiver depth in a double flex full PPR format. We've got to try and identify some good value wide receivers as well. So looking into the 11.12 and the 12.1, let's go ahead and take a look at some players that might be available. There's a potential that Jacoby Myers falls out. I like him in this range. I think opposing defenses will be accounting for Devontae Adams on a regular basis. And on top of that, Myers is not that bad of a wide receiver through his first 4 years in the league. And the Raiders are going to be playing from behind a lot and throwing the football because they're not going to have a choice because this defense could be literally the worst in the league, probably right next to the Arizona Cardinals. I also like Darnell Mooney in this range because we already talked about the Bears taking a step forward as an offense. Justin Fields taking a step forward as a passer. I think that Darnell Mooney is a good enough option, even coming off of the injury. Disappointing year last year, but when you look at things, when Fields was starting to get going, right in week 8 against Dallas, 12 points for Mooney. The following week against Miami, 17.5. Week 10, 9.7. Week 11, 12.9. He was starting to get going and even had some decent games between weeks 4 and week 6. And then he got hurt in week 12. So I still think Mooney in a full PPR format, full PPR alone, he's never really been a huge touchdown scorer, never scored more than 4 in his career, but I still think he is worth a shot, in the 11th or 12th round of mocks right now. Outside of that, I don't love Zay Jones, but I would consider Zay Jones, at this point in the draft. Like I said, definitely not my favorite player, but ultimately still a player that we can certainly consider. I mean, Ridley's going to take away a lot of Zay Jones' upside, but he's still a name to consider because that offense is just going to be much better. Outside of that, Rashid Shaheed is a late round wide receiver I'm taking left and right. He is that home run hitter. Derek Carr threw the most deep balls and was one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL last season. He's going to develop a good chemistry with Rashid Shaheed. Yes, Michael Thomas, if he's alive, is going to get a lot of targets. Yes, Chris Olave, hands down, is the best wide receiver in that wide receiver room. But even if Michael Thomas is out there and is not on injured reserve for the 5th year in a row or whatever, Rashid Shaheed is going to take the top off of defenses. He's going to be open. And in my opinion, if Thomas is out there and even, their multitude of tight ends are out there between, Taysom Hill, Jawan Johnson, and now Jimmy Graham, all of that is good for a young receiver like Rashid Shaheed because it's going to allow him to not have a lot of defensive pressure on him. So absolutely love him as a late round pick. KJ Osborne's still okay. Addison's going to take over that wide receiver 2 spot, but the Vikings are going to throw the football out. They were one of the pass heaviest teams in the league last year. Alec Pierce, a name I like in this range. Van Jefferson, Donovan Peoples-Jones. There are plenty of options that I still like. At the end of the day, there's always value in late round wide receivers. There's always somebody you can take a shot on who gives you some upside. And if they don't get drafted, they're probably going to become a hot waiver wire addition shortly into the season. So, nonetheless, let's take a look here. Basically all those guys we just talked about are available, and I don't think you can really go wrong with any of these selections coming up. So let's go with Jacoby Myers and Darnell Mooney. Let's just go by ADP and let's see, Rashid Shaheed is not going to fall to us. He's too popular of a name in the fantasy community, but let's see. I've got Rashid Shaheed, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Van Jefferson, and Alec Pierce queued up. Let's see who falls to us. I don't feel like we need to take a second quarterback, but we could go for some upside with that final pick at the 13.12 and go Kyler Murray. We could see if Daniel Jones falls out to us. But really, the only pick that makes sense for me if we go another quarterback is Kyler Murray because, before he got hurt last year, top 7 quarterback, it at least gives us some upside to look forward to. Plus, one thing you guys need to start to consider as we move through the month of August, depending on when you're drafting, if you take Kyler Murray with your final pick, as soon as your draft ends, you can put him on IR. In a majority of leagues, he's on the PUP list. Majority of leagues allow PUP list players on the IR. Put him on your IR and hit the waiver wire right away and take, a player who has the equivalent of a 13th rounder anyways. So definitely something to consider, something that I'm not against. But let's look at top available running backs because it wouldn't necessarily hurt for us to take a fifth and final running back here, but the names just aren't that good. I'd rather fight for a player on the waiver wire. I mean, Devin Singletary, Donta Foreman, Ezekiel Elliott, Raheem Mostart, Jalen Warren, Jeff Wilson. It's just not great. Then you're looking at like handcuffs like Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, Tajay Spears, Chuba Hubbard, Zamir White. It's just not that great. I like Kenneth Gainwell late, but I just don't think he's someone that we're going to have to necessarily draft. If I'm drafting one of those players, it's probably Donta Foreman because I do think at the end of the day, Donta Foreman will start the year as the Bears' primary running back, but I don't know how long that's going to last. Khalil Herbert's not a great pass blocker, so I think he's going to be kind of subjected to a specific role. And then when we look at Roshan Johnson, he has the ability to take over that backfield, but I still think it's going to take some time being that he's a rookie running back. So in redraft formats, final round, I don't mind Donta Foreman, but I just think there's probably more upside at other positions. If we wanted to go with another tight end, we could. Chicken Conquo sitting here and Greg Dulcich is sitting here. If I'm picking between the two, I prefer Greg Dulcich for a lot of different reasons. He's probably my favorite late round tight end. I've talked a lot about him throughout the offseason. We look at his rookie year. Yeah, he missed a lot of time, but Sean Payton historically loves the tight end position. He had 411 receiving yards in his rookie year, 2 receiving touchdowns. There's so many reasons to like Greg Dulcich, and I know a lot of fantasy managers out there are fans of him. I'm not always feeling great when I come out of drafts and he's my tight end one, but I also don't really mind it because Dulcich absolutely has an opportunity to break out in his sophomore campaign. And we've already talked about the Broncos offense tonight, but if you believe in Jerry Jeudy progressing, not that he hasn't progressed in the last year or so, if you believe in Cortland Sutton progressing, Javonte Williams progressing, even Samaje Perine, and Russell Wilson progressing from the dumpster fire that we saw last year, then at the end of the day, Greg Dulcich should be right in line because maybe outside of Jerry Jeudy, he has the most upside, in my opinion, out of all of those players, speaking from a fantasy perspective. So he's a great late round option. I mean, we're seeing guys like Higbee and Laporta go. That's fine. I mean, we're getting lots of buzz. Laporta is a top receiving option for the Lions, and Higbee is a great value in the 13th round. But nonetheless, I love Greg Dulcich late. I still think with this final pick, we're probably going wide receiver, especially now that Donta Foreman's gone. Don't get me wrong. Raheem Mostart, Jeff Wilson, you could take a shot on one of those guys. I think Devon Shane is a guy I want out of that backfield. And we're still to see, do they trade for Jonathan Taylor? We've heard some buzz about that. Do they sign Dalvin Cook? I don't know. Right now, at this point in the offseason, I'm a little bit more hesitant. But I think looking at this roster, we're sitting here with 6 wide receivers. I think we take one final wide receiver. And for me, it's probably Donovan Peoples-Jones because even though Elijah Moore is there now, you already have David Njoku there at the tight end position. And then you have Amari Cooper locked in as a wide receiver 1. And then they did go out and draft said Tillman as well. DPJ has already established a role within that offense and at the end of the day had good enough chemistry with Deshaun Watson. 13 points in Deshaun Watson's first game back last year, and then the following week 19 points, and then the week after that 13 points before taking a little bit of a drop off at the end of the year. Nonetheless, DPJ is in an offense that's going to throw the football a ton and has the opportunity to act as a wide receiver 2 in that offense, at worst the wide receiver 3. So worth a shot here, especially if anything, God forbid, happens to Amari Cooper or Elijah Moore throughout the season. So let's take one last look at the team. That's going to wrap it up for the night. We've got Justin Fields at quarterback. Give me that all day long. Give me the upside. Pat Freiermuth, a fantastic value in the 10th round. Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, and Jerick McKinnon at running back. Running back probably the weakest part of this team, but I'm still okay with that running back room. Najee and DeAndre Swift are going to be the guys we rely on, week in and week out. And then Javonte and McKinnon, I think, are good bench options. We're starting CeeDee Lamb. We're starting A.J. Brown. We're starting DK Metcalf. And then in that second flex spot, Quentin Johnson, as the season goes on, is the guy I'm hoping will be there. But Jacoby Myers, Darnell Mooney, and Donovan Peoples-Jones are all viable options. And at the end of the day, we could flex Javonte Williams or Jerick McKinnon. So there's a team we threw together. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of today's mock draft. And like I said at the beginning of the video, any mock draft requests that you guys have, regardless of format, please let me know in the comments down below and I will get it added to the schedule as soon as I can. Guys, hit the subscribe button on the way out if you guys found this video helpful in any way. Drop me any comments pertaining to the coming season. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And hit the like button on the way out and check out our links down below. That'll wrap it up for today's mock draft. And with that, I will say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.